So Lee, are we ready to go?
I believe we are. Jenny, we're live streaming.
Yes, we're live.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Let's get it going. I'd like to call this meeting to order and start by thanking all of you guys for the flexibility in having this meeting, special meeting, and the flexibility to adjusting to the virtual setting. I know that's not always the easiest for these kind of meetings, but definitely appreciated. So as a reminder, this meeting is being live streamed on the Central Pines Regional Council YouTube channel. So we'd like everyone to identify themselves by name when they speak during the meeting to comply with virtual meeting laws. All votes will be conducted by roll call to comply with laws around virtual meetings, and Beth Davis will call roll each time a vote is needed. So Beth, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Let me find it. Okay. Aberdeen.
Aberdeen, Wilma Laney, present.
Apex.
Brett Gant, present.
Carborough.
Randy Haven O'Donnell, Carborough, present.
Durham, City of Durham. Durham County. Johnston County. Lee County. Moore County. Orange County. I see Jean connecting. Jean, I'm just going to mark you as present because I see you as present. Pittsburgh. I see Pamela. Sanford.
Rebecca Salmon, City of Sanford, here.
Selma. And Wake County.
Susan Evans here, White County.
All right, we have quorum.
Okay, thank you very much, Beth. So next is a review of the agenda. Hopefully you guys have gotten a chance to look through the agenda previously, but as a quick review, the main order of business is a continuation of the last executive committee meeting related to the foreign trade zone sponsorship request by U.S. flue-cured tobacco growers. And then there's a couple items on consent that I'll review at that point. But does anybody have any changes to the agenda? Okay, thank you very much. Then I'll approve the agenda and let's proceed. So first and main item of business is related to that foreign trade zone sponsorship request. As you guys may recall, this request was first presented last time we met together, but there were a lot of questions about foreign trade zones, policy decisions related to the foreign trade zones. So I'm going to pass it over to Lee to present this item. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Oh, you can't hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Beth, Delegate Lauder just emailed and needs the link to the meeting. So, and then also if y'all could, whoever's got the PowerPoint, if you can start the PowerPoint.
I just let Butch in. See the one that's calling in? Oh no, we have a phone number, so I'm trying to figure out if that's somebody trying to call in.
Let's go ahead and let them in. And if we have to kick them out, we can, since it's a public meeting.
Okay. Is Jenny sharing? Jenny, are you sharing the PowerPoint?
No, I don't have it. Sorry.
Okay. Let me do that.
All right, so while Beth is getting the PowerPoint ready, I appreciate everybody, like the chair said, being willing and able to attend this special meeting. And I'm sorry for the amount of information I sent to you, but in the spirit of trying to provide all the information that the board or the executive committee had asked for, I wanted to make sure we got you everything. So I'm going to, at a pretty high level, discuss the recommendation and the reason why I'm making several recommendations. Certainly, if the board has any questions, I can stop to ask questions. I know we also have representatives from the applicant available if you have a question, as well as Lindsay Whitson and Thomas McAllister, who work on the foreign trade zone on behalf of the organization. So this special meeting is to consider the sponsorship request for U.S. flue-cured tobacco for foreign trade zone number 93. So Beth, if you can advance to the next slide, please. And I think we've got it in preview mode.
Okay, I was wondering how y'all saw that.
Yep. We'll keep trucking in the interest of time. And if we can't get it fixed, we'll keep going. Try it again.
It's weird because it's playing on my other screen, like full screen.
Yeah, I think if you go to display settings and do duplicate, it should fix it. But let's try to keep going.
Okay.
Actually, just do it like that.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to give a little bit of an overview of the foreign trade zone. Talk and then talk through the questions that the executive committee had. But as a preview or as an overview, our foreign trade zone, we were granted the authority from the federal foreign trade zone all the way back in 1983. This is a unique program for us because it actually includes all of our region, but extends out into 15 counties, including ours. So we go out into the Carter region, the Upper Coastal Plain region, and the Mid-Carolina region. We have 9 active foreign trade zone sites and 2 pending applications. And we have a foreign trade zone board, which I outlined in the memo that has given a lot of time to helping us guide the work of the FTZ. Next slide. So Foreign Trade Zone is a federal program that was established back in the 30s to stimulate economic development and increase global competitiveness. It's established by a federal statute that I provided to you. And there is a U.S. FTZ board that is the federal entity that manages the program. It's under the U.S. Department of Commerce, and it regulates the administration of foreign trade zones. It reports to Congress on outcomes. Customs and Border Protection serve an advisory role because they're sort of the boots on the ground that works to make sure that the foreign trade zone sites are operating correctly. Next slide, please. So Lindsay did a good job of overviewing this at the last meeting. But since we have some folks that weren't here at the last meeting, foreign trade zone site is a designated area where foreign and domestic merchandise is considered to be outside of U.S. Customs territory. It's a secured area. We went to the next slide. We went to the beginning.
Sorry, I'm trying to do multiple things at one time.
It's okay. No worries.
Is this the right slide or does it need to be?
It
this
is. No, it's the next one.
Okay.
So it really encourages foreign commerce by reducing and eliminating import duties and simplifying custom procedures. There's 197 active FTZ programs across the U.S. The estimate from the Foreign Trade Zone Board is that results in just over 500,000 jobs and 1,300 plus businesses, about 149 billion in exported merchandise. And we've talked about some of the benefits for business and paying the duties when it's in the U.S. commerce, the fact that you can do certain things within the foreign trade zone. So it really is sort of an economic development program and falls under that community and economic development focus area for our regional council. Next slide. I won't go into this one too much, but these are the things that can be done in a foreign trade zone site. Not all businesses do all of these things, obviously, but this is an example of what is done in our foreign trade zone sites. Next slide. So application process, there's a pre-application where the applicant approaches our staff, that's Thomas and Lindsay, to request sponsorship of their application. They complete a site review with Customs and Border Control. And then the sponsorship process is where the applicant requests sponsorship of their application to the Foreign Trade Zone 93 board. And then they provide a recommendation. And then that goes to either the board of delegates or, as in this case, the executive committee. If the executive committee or the board approves sponsorship, that sponsorship is then forwarded to the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board, which then has final say on approving or denying the application. And as the grantee, part of our role and responsibility is to guide the applicant, the business, through that process, because it's pretty easy, but it is a federal program there, so got to dot those I's and cross those T's to be eligible. Next slide. So let's talk a little more specifically. And again, I'm going to be at a pretty high level. If you have very specific questions, I'm sure the folks from the applicant can answer those very specific questions. This is the first foreign trade zone request we've had from Person County, which is outside of our region, but within our foreign trade zone. And again, the activity is the storage of locally manufactured tobacco products, both cigarette and pipe products for global export, utilizing North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia ports. Again, some highlights. First, in Person County, this would replace a logistics provider in Georgia with a locally owned operation, reduces the supply chain delivery time from 3 days to 2 hours, provides some employment opportunities within the county, and as the applicant has conveyed, that it would provide some cost-saving benefits for their farmer owners. So the next steps are that we're awaiting and talking to you right now about the executive committee's direction around the sponsorship package before submission to the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board. All right, next slide. So a little bit of the history. November 6th, the request for sponsorship was made to the Foreign Trade Zone Board and received unanimous approval, forwarded to the Executive Committee. On the 20th, that item was presented to the Executive Committee, and the Executive Committee voted to table the request with several questions and requests to staff in terms of information that they desired. We'll go into detail on the motion as we get further into the slides. So again, the next steps are today, your executive committee meeting, and based on your direction, whether we present this or forward this on to the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board. Next slide. So before I go into the specific research, I want to pause and see if there are any questions about the process, about the foreign trade zone in general. You may have questions about the application and about the research. I'd ask, if possible, let's hold that until we get to the specific agenda items. But if there are questions overall, I'm happy to answer them, or I'll hand it off to Lindsay and Thomas, who are much more versed in this than I.
Jean Hamilton, I have a question. I think it's appropriate at this point. I looked over the information that you sent. Thank you for the detail. Really appreciate it. And when I read something like that, the foreign trade zone may recommend sponsorship by Central Pines, and that may makes me ask, you know, is this a requirement? What, you know, why are we doing this as an executive board, as the board of delegates?
That's an excellent question, Ms. Hamilton. So a couple answers to that question. We have, as a matter of practice, we have always brought, even before I was the director, we've always brought these requests to the board of delegates and or the executive committee. One, I think to make them aware of these opportunities and to make sure that the governing body was comfortable with them. I think, as you'll see in my recommendations, I think as we were digging into this, that was very apparent that the process is not as clear as it should be, and that we need some clarity around that. To get to your specific question, I don't know if the board has to necessarily approve it, but we have brought it to the board and you have provided some initial direction. So if the board wants to, I guess an option would be if the board wants to not take a vote, and then we provide the sponsorship to USFTZ. Absent a board recommendation, we can certainly lean on that. There's nothing that requires a board vote, and the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone 93 board voted to approve, to forward the request. But I think it's not very clear, and we need to clear that up. I hope that helps. Yes, ma'am. All right, I'm going to keep moving then. So I'm going to try to unpack the motion in a couple different parts and go through each part of the motion. So if you'll advance to the next screen, we'll take on the first part of the motion. So the first part of the motion says, what does the charter state? And so I read that very literally as the Central Pines Regional Council charter, but we also, I went a little deeper and said perhaps, and I think it was Mr. Carver, who's not on the board anymore, that brought that up. Perhaps he also meant, what are the foundational documents, right, around the foreign trade zone? So the charter of Central Pines Regional Council does not address the foreign trade zone. It really doesn't address specifically any of our programs. But the four guiding documents for the foreign trade zone are included in your packet, and they are the Foreign Trade Zone Act of 1934, which is the congressional action that put this into law, the Code of Federal Regulations that addresses FTZs, which is 15 CFR 400, and then locally, there are two documents, our zone schedule, which is also sort of the guidance document, the rules for the foreign trade zone, and then the board bylaws that for the Foreign Trade Zone 93 board. So those four documents are provided to you. Ms. Hamilton referred to a clause about foreign trade zone requests may be forwarded to the board. That is located in the board bylaws. So the reason why I said I don't know if there's any requirement that it comes to you is because it's not in the zone schedule. It's not a mandate in the CFR or the federal act. So it's just the Foreign Trade Zone Board, which you all appoint. It's in their bylaws that they may forward requests. So it's unclear at best, but we're relying on past practice and what we've always done, bringing it to the board for consideration. All right, next slide. What is the executive committee's responsibility in this process? And I think that gets to Ms. Hamilton's question. I won't go through this too much more. I actually just went through that slide and talked about that. There's not a requirement in the zone schedule. You know, we bring those to the board as practice and to keep you informed. And the board has always voted on sponsorship requests. Next slide. How does this affect past decisions? I think for me as an executive director, this is the critical piece for me that weighed into my recommendation specifically for this sponsorship request. So we had a tobacco company come to Central Pines, then Triangle J in 2017. They're located in Wilson. They requested a foreign trade zone sponsorship, tobacco rag processors. That was approved by the Board of Delegates in 2017. It is still in operation. It's our foreign trade zone site 8. And both in the Code of Federal Regulations and the U.S. Code and our zone schedule, there's this there's uniform treatment provision. And it basically means that we should treat all applicants that are similar in the same way. And so uniform treatment for all applicants under like conditions. We had conversations with the U.S. Foreign Trade Zone Board about this uniform treatment and about the application to U.S. flue-cured tobacco. And we believe that this falls under uniform treatment in terms of our recommendation that the board should approve this application. Now, you'll notice further in my recommendations, if the board would like to direct staff that no additional tobacco companies be permitted in the foreign trade zone, we can easily bring you an amendment to the zone schedule at the next meeting. And then when an applicant comes to us, we can tell them on the front end, those are not allowed. I'll get into that a little bit more in the recommendations. But in terms of past decisions, I think it's really important to stress the uniform treatment portion of several of the foundational documents for the foreign trade zone. All right, next slide. So there was a part of the motion, do FTZs take a position on cultural aspects of tobacco storage? We had staff start reviewing every zone schedule of every foreign trade zone, and it was very time consuming. So after Thomas, thank you, Thomas, reviewed 77 of the 259, I told him to stop because we had a pretty good sample size. There were no zone schedules that we found that prohibited the storage of tobacco. There is some language about prohibiting the manufacturing of tobacco. That is related more to internal revenue, federal revenue provisions. Like San Francisco mentions it. Flue-cured tobacco, this application is not, the foreign trade zone is only for storage, not for manufacturing. There is going to be manufacturing taking place, but it's not going to be in the foreign trade zone area. So storage of tobacco, we did not find any zones that prohibited that. Again, if that's something that the executive committee would like to pursue, that can easily be added and we can bring that to you at our next meeting. Next slide. So there was also a question about the economic and health burdens of tobacco. So we provided several pieces of information to provide information around that question. Of course, there is a lot of evidence about the harm of smoking and the harm of tobacco. You can go to the Centers for Disease Control and see several studies related to that. There are economic impacts around that in a negative way. There are also positive impacts of tobacco for this state. It is a high yield crop. It remains a high yield crop for farmers. It remains one of the highest producing crops in North Carolina. The facility itself is going to be valued at about $2.7 million, which equates to about $20,000 in property tax revenue for Person County. The warehouse is not located in a municipality, so county taxes, and as the applicant stated, about 10 to 12 full-time jobs with an increase of about 27 to 30 support jobs. So like any tough public issue, there are certainly aspects of it where tobacco is harmful, has created impacts on communities, but there are also some positive economic impacts to this specific business, to Person County, and to the community. So providing that as information as you deliberate on your decision. So let me get to my recommendations, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So I actually have 4 recommendations for the executive committee to consider. First recommendation is based on the uniform treatment provisions. I recommend that the executive committee approve resolution 2025-0101, which endorses the FTZ sponsorship application of U.S. flu-cured tobacco growers. My second recommendation is that the executive committee discuss, if you want to, and provide direction to staff on any changes that you'd like to see to the zone schedule prohibiting future application from companies that store tobacco-based products. The third recommendation I have for you is that you ask the Foreign Trade Zone Board to conduct an annual review of the zone schedule for this purpose, and to provide recommendations. Are there other businesses that maybe ought to be considered for exclusion, or should businesses that are excluded now be permitted? I think that's part of this, is that we've had this for so long that there haven't been reviews of the schedule in a routine manner to make sure that we're targeting businesses maybe that the regional council wants to target, right? Target industries, or we're excluding businesses that do not align with the region's priorities. And then fourth and finally, I think, and this is to Ms. Hamilton's question, I think there needs to be an in-depth review of the consideration process for foreign trade zones. I think there's a couple things we ought to look at. One, the process, who approves, how it happens, make sure it's very clear. The second thing that I noticed as we went through this is that our foreign trade zone expands beyond the 7 counties that you all represent. And so perhaps there's an opportunity to engage the other regional councils or the other counties on having their elected officials or some representation on a body that makes those final decisions. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think it's something we ought to take a look at. So thank you for bearing with me. This was a long one, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Mr. Chair, back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Do we have any questions before we get to voting? Yeah, Ms. Hamilton.
Yeah, I have a comment, or a couple of comments. I really support having a review to see if, again, if this process is even necessary to have the executive board weigh in. I mean, one may consider that if we are appointing people to that board, that's where we are just, having input, or if we're deciding on the schedule. So that's one comment. I think the other big comment I have is to disagree, but I'm not a lawyer, with this uniform treatment. Because I read it talks about like conditions. Well, one condition that's different is it is a different time. 2017 is not the same as 2025. I would absolutely consider if we had two companies that were exactly the same coming before us, right? We couldn't say no to one and yes to the other. That's what I think of uniform treatment in like conditions. So I see time as a difference, because otherwise, why are we reviewing this, right? Things change, we get new information. So I disagree with that definition of uniform as driving the reason that we should consider it. And so anyway, so I look at the economic impact, right? I view that we have these trade zones because we want to promote, economic growth. However, economists often do not include externalities and look at the total impact on the economy. And given the evidence, I don't think we serve our economy well, even Person County, with isn't subsidizing a product that does harm. So that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Sampson. Lee, I had a question real quick for you, if you don't mind. Are you or staff concerned in recommendation number 2 about some kind of slippery slope scenario where, like, hopefully this doesn't happen, and in my head there could be a thing where we do this and then that opens the door for thinking about, and maybe it would be related to number 4 as well, or 3, other industries that would be affected. And I can see a scenario if we did that and went down that route, we could maybe do one, I'm not sure it'd be relevant here, but like a fossil fuel industry. And then if we did that, there may be a different change in the board that maybe says, okay, now we're going to prohibit a solar panel or a renewable energy company, just kind of a tit for tat thing. And like, is that plausible? And maybe all these industries wouldn't really fall into this, but is staff concerned about that scenario of a escalation in this?
Particular concern, I think the recommendation is more centered around what we heard specifically about tobacco-based products. And I think the other thing it had me thinking about is we also probably ought to have some direction about, what are the target industries we ought to go after? Because we're also trying to recruit foreign trade zone companies or companies to come into the foreign trade zone. I don't have a particular concern about it. But, when you're making policy, it's always a possibility. And you all could do that now without this recommendation.
Thank you.
Lee, this is, excuse me, this is Rebecca Salmon. I guess I had a similar question to Brett. When that review was going on, and I guess you said it was 77 different sets of rules that you looked at, how many of them singled out any industries in specific? And did those, to that point, begin to start having long lists of different industries that they did not allow, or did they specifically say what they were trying to promote? How common a practice was this across those 77 that were looked at?
Lee, I can chime in.
Lindsay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, there was actually no specific industry that was singled out in any of those 77 cases, or zones, FTZ zones. So yeah, we can't, and we spoke with some staff at the US FTZ board, and they couldn't think of any off the top of their mind right now either. But of course, they're not monitoring everyone's zone schedules. They are, but not, every year. So, but they couldn't think of anyone off the top of their head as well.
The only prohibitions we saw, and Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, were those that were related to some other federal rules in terms of revenue. So there were some references to the manufacture of tobacco, or I think firearms and some other things, but they were more tied to some other federal rules and not specifically a decision to prohibit because of a policy reason with the foreign trade zone.
And this is Rebecca Salmon again. And to the point that was brought up about bringing folks into the decision process from the counties that participate in the zone but are not a part of Central Pines, that really is a function right now that is being served by the Foreign Trade Zone Board. There has been a very concerted effort to make sure that we have board members that represent a wide swath of the breadth of how far the trade zone goes. And perhaps, we could make sure, I think we do have some latitude about how many board members serve on that. That's a place that if we needed to pull in more representation, we probably could.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Any additional questions or
Brett,
comments?
you mind if I chime in?
Yeah.
So I want to start out by agreeing with my colleague from Orange County, Gene, on number 4. I agree this, what is our role in this process? And can we refine that and take a look at that? However, I'm going to disagree on the rest of it. Many of these the counties in Central Pines, and I'm going to speak for Johnston County, farming and tobacco have been the backbone of our economies for decades. And even today, it's about 20%, 15 to 20% of our economy, and about 20% of that ag economy is still tobacco based. So I have a real problem. What I would see is a social or cultural issue becoming something that's an economic decision. And I get there's a lot of industries that have, and Brett mentioned some of them that have other problems with it. And then we're going to target this industry specifically in recommendation number 2. And then overall, are we going to decide to target other industries? I'd much prefer to take a case-by-case basis than go ahead and develop lists of folks that we don't want to come to the FTZ here. And I will say in Johnston County, we're talking very thin margins for our farmers to survive. And this isn't a company. This is people. This is growers that we're talking about. So I have a real problem talking to probably a shrinking breed of folks who are willing to work in agriculture, and we're saying we're going to cut you out of this, and make your margins even tougher to make. So again, Gene, on number 4, I think, what does our role really need to be in this? But the other side of it is I don't see targeting tobacco and our farmers as what we should get involved in.
I'll have to echo Chairman Lauder's sentiments from Johnston County, Selma, North Carolina, Byron McAllister, Mayor. it is hard for me to say that we should be working on social and health policy in this particular arena as Central Pines Council, let alone making such a big decision for Person County based on social and health considerations beyond foreign trade zone and economic considerations. So I would say that yes, maybe we do need to look at our role overall in the foreign trade zone conversation, but targeting industries is something that we should stray away from completely.
Hi, this is Susan Evans. First of all, Lee, will you refresh my memory? I understand we're having this debate as to whether the executive board has to vote on this particular approval or not, but can you refresh my memory about why the regional council has responsibility to approve these sponsorships?
So we were, this is actually, it's interesting. When we held the world-class region conferences back in the early 80s, the idea of the regional council being the entity that managed a foreign trade zone came out of that conversation. There was like 400 people there, and there were several big ideas that surfaced. And so from that, the local governments and probably the Raleigh-Durham Airport, since they're sort of the port, all worked together to get us designated as the foreign trade zone administrator. And so we've had that responsibility since the early 1980s. And it's a little unique for a regional council. Well, not super unique. There are other regional councils across the country that do this. But I think us and Land of Sky may have just created a foreign trade zone up in their area, but we're the only regional council that does this in North Carolina. For the other foreign trade zones, there are other types of entities that administer it.
Thank you for that background. I just couldn't remember.
Yes, ma'am.
So my thoughts tend to be in line with Commissioner Lauder and Councilman McAllister. I'm just a bit uncomfortable around us talking about exercising discretion over which types of businesses we would and wouldn't approve to have the benefits of the foreign trade zone. I mean, I understand there are social and health concerns around tobacco, but there are concerns around alcohol. There are concerns around many of the things that we eat, processed foods. We could go on and on and on. Red dye number 5. You know, there's just a laundry list of things that probably are not healthy for us, but I just don't really feel like that's our purview and I think we could go really down a rabbit hole. We'd have to evaluate every other type of business that is participating in the foreign trade zone to look at whether, you know, they're have some risk with their products. And so I'm just not in favor of feeling like we need to be applying philosophical social concerns to something that is just sort of a standard decision. I understand, you know, that tobacco is bad for people and that we've proven that, but that doesn't mean people aren't going to continue to buy it that want it. And if we're just hurting the farmer or making it harder for him to make his small profit, I just don't think that's going to change the outcome of whether or not people are using tobacco. And feel like we would be flexing our muscles inappropriately. And so I'm not interested in starting to look at what types of products we would prohibit and what types we would allow. And that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Hmm.
Miss Laney, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking because it's kind of difficult for me. Yeah, I was hoping that we could just not necessarily vote on it. We can do that too, not be one way or the other. Is it something we have to vote on?
Well, yeah, let me ask Lee that. I was thinking about that too, is you don't have a recommendation here, Lee, on just delegating this decision to the FTZ subcommittee, or I forget what we called it. That's not a recommendation from you? Or would that be part of the review, I guess, of the schedule? Or number 4?
It was not my recommendation, but I think it is an option for the board. The only question I would have is how the USFTZ board would look at it. But I think it is an option. I don't think, and we could certainly say that we don't have a requirement in the zone schedule that the governing board vote on it, and that the USFTZ board has recommended sponsorship. So my recommendation was based on the fact that we had already brought this to the board for consideration, and you all had asked some specific questions, and so we're following through on that. But
okay,
the
thank
board
you.
does not have to vote. That's your prerogative.
Okay. Randy, I see your hand.
Yeah, first of all, Lee and staff, I want to commend you on what looks like a tremendous amount of work to just doing your homework to not only prepare these slides, the information that was sent, and Lee, the recommendations, the depth of thinking that went into carving out each of these recommendations. It strikes me as being very thoughtful and mindful of not only where the federal trade zone decisions have been made in the past, where we stand now, and with an interesting eye to the future. I really appreciate this conversation. It raises several important points. I think one of the things that we need to consider is that the number 4, the role of the executive board. And I don't know, it's which comes first. Do we make a decision about this with the assumption that the executive board should not be casting a vote, or do we go forward with a vote knowing that we would like staff to look into the process further and review and refine what our role is in terms of FTZ sponsorship. I like Jean's question, looking back at 2017, and this is not 2017, but I do understand why, in particular, uniform treatment might be a consideration, given that Person County is not part of the CPRC. So I don't know if I'm helping in this conversation, but if there were a way that we could delegate the decision to the FTZ without raising questions from the US FTZ. That's something I'd like to know, whether it's been done before, whether it's, a direction we could take. Could I live with all 4 of these recommendations? I probably could, because I think they've been very thoughtfully draft. But I think there's, the larger question of our role in regard to this is something we probably need to, to nail down. Thanks.
Brett.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, this is Pamela Baldwin, Town of Pittsburgh. I just
Okay.
wanted to thank the staff for all of this information they provided in reference to this particular topic. Also, I'd like to say historically, we have always, as Triangle J and going forward, hopefully, Central Pines voted on these applications. And in reference to this particular application, I think it would be unfair to single them out to say because it is it's in reference to tobacco that we do not want to approve this particular application. I think it is about fairness. There are others there, and I would not like to single out companies that you would want to say, we don't want that in the FTC zone. So as far as I am concerned, I agree with recommendation number 1, which would approve that resolution, and staff can certainly go forward in recommendation number 4 to direct the staff to review and refine the FTC sponsorship consideration process. So I am happy with those 2 recommendations, and I certainly thank you for listening to me, and thank the staff for all of this information.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Do we have anybody else? Okay.
This is Rebecca Salmon. I agree with Ms. Baldwin.
Okay. Thank you. I think as long as everybody's okay and has had their say, had their comments, questions answered, I think we are good to proceed on voting on these. And I think what I'm hearing is maybe we split these up, although that might be painful for Beth, and have separate votes on some of these topics. I don't know if we can group them to make it easier, but yeah, I'd recommend at least I'm not sure these go together. Maybe 1 and 2 get their own vote, and 3 and 4 can be together. Would that make sense?
Chair Gant, I'd like to make a motion that we approve recommendation 1, 2, and 4. I mean, I'm sorry, 1, 3, and 4. A motion to approve recommendation 1, 3, and 4 is my motion.
1, 3, and 4 as one motion. Okay. Thank you. Mr. McAllister, do we have
So actually, we're going to be storing the tobacco. Is that right? This is storing cured tobacco.
Lee, can you?
Yeah. Okay.
The foreign trade zone that you're voting on is for the storage of tobacco.
Yeah. That's hard to do.
Did somebody second Mr. McAllister's motion?
I will second it if nobody else did.
And that was Butch?
Butch Lawler, Johnson County.
Okay.
Sorry, Ms. Seidel.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion prior to a vote? Okay, so just to review, we're going to split these up 1, 3, and 4 to approve those recommendations. That's the motion on the table. Beth, would you take the vote?
Okay, I'm sorry. Can I ask a question? This is Susan.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. Go. Yeah. Before you go ahead.
On recommendation 3, direct the Foreign Trade Zone Board to conduct an annual review of the FTC 93 zone schedule. What are we implying that we want to see in that annual review?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Lee, did you have any more detail on that one?
So I think it's an excellent question. And so I think I discussed this earlier. One of the things that we realized as staff through some staff changes and some other things is that the zone schedule has not been updated since, Lindsay, help me, 19.
No, sorry, it was 2016.
2016. And so I think there needs to be a review of the zone schedule yearly to make sure, one, that the costs that we're charging are appropriate, that everything is still workable. I think to Ms. Hamilton's, has time changed anything that we need to be thinking about or doing differently? So to me, it's a holistic review of the zone schedule. And it's just providing that direction to the board and really to staff to make sure that it's being checked on every year, reviewed, and if anything needs to be changed, that it's brought to the executive committee for consideration, because you all are the ones that need to approve the zone schedule.
Okay, and
good.
And while we're at it, how's that differ from the 4, that review?
So number 4 is a specific direction to staff to look at the actual process of approving a sponsorship request. And so based on what I'm hearing today, it's, do the requests even come to the executive committee? Is the Foreign Trade Zone Board appropriately representative of the entire foreign trade zone? I think there's some conflicting information, like in the bylaws. Lindsay and I have talked about, well, why do they even have bylaws if there's a zone schedule? So I think it's looking at all that process and cleaning it up.
Okay.
It's like a one-time in-depth review, and then making sure that we're checking on it every year through the recommendation number 3.
Okay. Ms. Evans, did that clear things up for you?
Yes, all that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Before we vote, any more discussion or questions about the motion?
So what is it going to be? Just 1 and 4, or 1, 3, and 4?
The motion was to do 1, 3, and 4
Okay.
as a vote together, approve those recommendations, and then presumably there might be a separate recommendation for number 2 after this vote. Okay. Do we have every question and comment answered? Okay, Beth, would you take the vote, please?
Yes. All right. Aberdeen.
Can I just vote present, or do I have to say yes or no?
That is a great question.
No, I didn't want to start that.
Do you want me to come back to you?
Yeah.
Aren't we voting on a motion?
Yes. So I would think you would have to do yes or no.
Yes, I think so.
But I'll come back to you, Wilma.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. Apex.
Brett Gant, aye.
Carborough.
Aye.
All right. City of Durham. Durham County.
Aye.
Johnston County.
Which Slaughter, aye.
Lee County, Moore County, Orange County,
Gene Hamilton, nay.
Pittsburgh,
Baldwin. Pamela Baldwin, aye.
okay. Sanford,
Rebecca Salmon, aye.
Selma,
Byron McAllister, aye.
Wake County,
Susan Evans, aye.
and then we'll go back to Miss Laney in Aberdeen.
Oh, boy. I'm I'm
Well,
gonna I'm gonna
is
say
this
no.
Robert's rules? Do we follow Robert's rules here?
Pardon me?
I'm asking, I was trying to clarify if you can answer present. If we follow Robert's rules, a present is a yes vote, but you can answer present.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll just say present.
Okay. All right. So the motion passes.
Okay, great. And congratulations to U.S. flu cured tobacco growers. Good luck on the rest of the process. Okay.
Thank you all very much. We appreciate your time and consideration and the discussion on this on our application. We really appreciate your all's efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Keller.
Thank you.
And thanks in advance to staff and the board for those reviews that may take place, that will take place in the future. Okay, now, do we have a motion on number 2?
Motion to deny recommendation 2. Deny direction to staff drafting changes to the zone schedule to prohibit future applications for companies that store tobacco-based products.
Okay.
I'll second that, Susan Evans.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Evans, and thank you, Mr. McAllister. Do we have any discussion or questions about number 2?
Well, if you're just it seems like we might come around to this again, so if we vote yes on, well, we get yes on all this time, you're saying we're not gonna address this anymore. We're just gonna continue on and not take number 2 in recommendations to prohibit future applications. Is that right?
Maybe Lee, it might be a timing thing where these reviews may come back with this, but if we, depending on what the vote is number 2, it may happen like, presumably, I assume a tobacco company could come in tomorrow and want to do this, and depending on this recommendation, they may be said yes to or said no to as far as beginning the process. But maybe Lee, can you speak to how 2 would interact with? I think it'd be 4.
Yes.
3.
So the motion right now is to deny number 2. I would say the board also could just choose not to vote on this and the zone schedule would stay as is. But let's take the opposite. If the board were to provide direction that you want to prohibit tobacco-based products, if another company came through the door, we don't have any companies right now, any others, but if one came through the door tomorrow that's tobacco-based, we would tell them you are not able to apply because the board has prohibited tobacco-based products from today forward.
Okay.
And that would only be the case if we approved recommendation 2, but the motion on the floor is to deny it.
I don't want to get too technical. The recommendation is that you provide us direction. It's not one way or the other. Okay, so and that's because the reason why I put that in there is because you all were having that conversation I don't, my recommendation is that if you're asking me what I think you keep the zone schedule like it is, but there was enough discussion and interest around that. I wanted to make sure that y'all had an opportunity to talk about it.
Okay.
And my motion to deny is on the basis that if you go back and definitely look at recommendation 4, to look at the FTZ sponsorship consideration process, we might answer some of those questions there, but looking at tobacco-based products alone is too narrow of a scope to even have you folks consider.
So, Mr. McAllister, just to clarify, the motion would be to direct staff to not make any changes to the zones.
Yeah,
okay.
No need to draft changes at all at this point.
Okay. Okay. Randy.
Yeah, I guess my question is this. If recommendation number 2 is asking for staff to provide us with what draft changes would look like, is there a problem asking for that direction to be followed and taking a look at it? I just think it's worth seeing what that would look like, and considering that. I understand what Byron's saying, but I think we can at least take a look and see what that would be like. At some point, we need to be considering the fact that things are changing, and I agree that if somebody came in tomorrow and said, well, based on uniform treatment, we should be able to be approved, that means that maybe we're not really looking at where the future needs to be. So yeah, I would just say I'd like to see a draft of changes.
Well, this is Susan Evans. Based on how the recommendation is worded now, it says provide direction to staff to draft changes to prohibit future applications for store tobacco-based products. I'm not interested in drafting changes to prohibit. And so I don't know. I'm wondering, Councilman McAllister, if we should just withdraw the motion and just not vote on recommendation 2 at all.
I can go with that as well. I just say we should stay very far away from approving recommendation 2, because I think that conversation lumps into recommendation 4, and we need to look at the broader picture if we're going to have serious concerns and comments about health issues with certain businesses participating in FTZs.
It would have to be broader, I agree, than just tobacco products, but I'm not in favor of asking the staff to just work on excluding tobacco products.
And this is Jean Hamilton. I agree with that. I think recommendation 2, it should be broader. It's not the direction. I think, to me, 4, really asking ourselves what our role is and if we should have this role is the most important recommendation.
So I will withdraw my second to the motion that was made.
And I'll withdraw the motion if we are okay with just tabling that completely.
Yes.
Okay. This will be some fun minutes to write up. Okay. So we have a withdrawn motion and second on number 2. And are there any final thoughts? Or I guess we could make them. Okay. We can make is there a motion for number 2? Is there people that feel differently and like to have a vote? before we end this. Okay, hearing none, we are going to go with 1, 3, and 4, and at least table number 2, and we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, everybody, for that. Mr. Chair. Oh, did I hear something?
Yes, it's Lee.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Lee.
I may be out of order, but the conversation and everything, and he wasn't here during the roll call. I just wanted to make sure that we welcomed our new alternate delegate from Durham County, Dr. Mike Lee. It's his first meeting, and Mr. Chair, I didn't know if you had seen that he had come on.
Okay.
But I wanted to just say welcome to the executive committee.
Sorry if
I'm out of order.
Yes. Mr. Lee is going to get a recognition at the main board meeting that we're going to have not too long from now. But welcome, and thank you for being here, Mr. Lee.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, and you'll get a proper welcome with everybody else next time. Okay, now, or in about an hour. Okay, so we have the last thing we have is the consent agenda. Let me read off the items. One is budget amendment number 3, and the second is deputy finance officer resolution. Okay, would anybody like these items to be removed for later consideration? Okay, hearing none, we will proceed. Okay, sorry. Then I should say, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Okay, I think that was Miss Laney.
Yeah, Haven O'Donnell.
Okay, thank you very much.
It was who?
Randy Haven O'Donnell, Barbara.
Randy made the motion.
I moved it. Yeah, I moved the consent agenda.
Okay. Now, Miss Laney, I think spoke up. Maybe Miss Laney, do you second that?
No, I didn't, but I second.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Beth, would you call the roll on this one?
Sure. All right, Aberdeen.
Aye.
Apex.
Greg Ant? Aye.
Harborough.
Randy Haven O'Donnell, aye.
City of Durham. Durham County.
Mike Lee, aye.
Johnston County.
Butch Lauder, aye.
Lee County. Moore County. Orange County.
Gene Hamilton, aye.
Pittsburgh.
Pamela Baldwin, Town of Pittsburgh, aye.
Sanford.
Rebecca Salmon, City of Sanford, aye.
Selma.
Byron McAllister, aye.
Wake County.
Susan Evans, aye.
All right, motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. And once again, I want to echo my appreciation for you guys for your flexibility in attending this special meeting and the great discussion we had about the FTZ zone and about the applicant. And with no other business to attend to, I'm going to adjourn the meeting and look forward to seeing you guys in about 45 minutes. Thanks so much.
Thank you.